3-6 graphs of rational functions. Okay, here are the steps you are going to follow for graphs of rational functions. Focus. Okay, so there are 7 steps we need to go through to figure out how to graph rational functions. First, we have to simplify any type of rational function we have. After we simplify, we want to find and plot the y-intercepts. Then you want to find the zeros of the numerator. You want to find the zeros of the denominator. You want to find and sketch any other asymptote. So if there's a slant asymptote, you want to sketch that. You want to plot at least one point between and one point beyond each x-intercept and the vertical asymptote. And then you use smooth curves to complete the graph. So all we're going to do today is graph a bunch of things. Okay? And then once we graph all of these, we can also graph them using our graphing calculator and check everything too. So you have to know how to do it by hand. You have to know how to do it on your graphing calculator. Cool? We're going to do a couple more probably than are on the board because I ran out of space almost. So, okay, how would I graph the first one? G of x equals -1 over x plus 2. Do I need to simplify anything? Yeah, I saw it. Do I need to simplify anything on that? How do I find the zeros? What do I need to do? Set the denominator equal to 0. So set x plus 2 equals 0, which means x equals -2. So I go to -2, right? And I put my asymptote there. My asymptote's going to become at -2. So it's not going to cross over this. If I have a parent function of this graph, my parent function would be here and here. So that means that this graph is shifting 1 unit down, correct? And 2 to the left, yes? Okay. It shifts because of the -1, and it's going to flip. So instead of being in this quadrant and this quadrant, I'm going to go here and here, okay? And I'm going to graph this. I can graph it by plugging in some points, okay? So we're going to plug in positives and negatives past, we're going to plug in a few points past -2, and then we're going to plug some on this side. So if I plug in a -3, what do you get out? Of -1 over -3 plus 2, so you get -1 over -1, which gives me 1, right? So -3, 1. If I plug in a -4, I'm going to get -1 over -2, which gives me 1/2. So -4 and 1/2 is the solution. Which means that my graph is going to go and curve like this. What in the world? Okay. And curve like this. Now I have to plug in some points on this side. So I'm going to plug in 0. If I plug in 0, I have -1, 0 plus 2, which gives me -1/2. So 0, -1/2 is the solution. If I plug in +1, I get -1 over 3. So 1 and 1, -1/3. So this graph is going to curve like this. And then I have that sketched out. So you're going to plug some points in, sketch the points, make your curves. You're going to plot your asymptotes. That's what I'm looking for us to do on this stuff. What about on this graph here? G of x equals 3x minus 2. What do I plot first? I take x minus 2 and I do what with it? Make it equal to 0. So if I take x minus 2, make it equal to 0, that means that x cannot equal 2. From there, I'm going to plug points in on either side of that. Now, because this is not negative, it's going to be in this quadrant still. Okay? I'm going to plug in, let's plug in 1 and 0. If I plug in 1, I get 1 minus 2, which gives me 3 over negative 1, so I get negative 3. So 1 gives me negative 3. Here's 1, here's negative 3. If I plug in negative 1, I get 3 over negative 3, which gives me negative 1. So I plug in negative 1, and I get negative 1 out. Nope, that's 0. Okay, so this one's going to curve like this. And it's going to come probably up towards here and curve. Okay. And then I'm going to plug in 3, and I'm going to plug in probably 5 or 6. So 3 over 3 minus 2 gives me 3 over 1, which gives me 3. So when you plug in 3, you get a 3 out. 3, 3. Makes sense. I'm going to plug in a 5, and I'm going to end up getting 3 over 3, which gives me 1. So I'm going to get 5, 1. So this graph is going like this. Okay? We're just sketching graphs today. Now, 2x minus 1 over x. What do you know about the top and the bottom on this one? What's different than the other ones? The top has an x. So if the top has an x, okay, remember I have to take the leading coefficients over top of each other, and that gives me an asymptote, right? It gives me, so I get 2 over 1, which equals 2, which is my y, correct? And then I take the bottom set equal to 0, so x equals 0 is my other asymptote. Okay. Now, from there I want to sketch some things. Okay. So I need to just plug in some points. Let's see here. I'm going to delete this for a minute. Let's just plug in some numbers. Let's plug in 1. If I have 2 times 1 minus 1 over 1, I get 2 minus 1 over 1, which gives me 1. So 1, 1 is a point. I'm going to plug in 3. 2 times 3 minus 1 over 1 gives me 6 minus 1, which is 5 over 1. So I get 3, 5. Okay. Then I'm going to plug in. I'm just going to keep plugging and chugging numbers in. Let's see here. Negative 4. Oh, I should say 5. That's why. So this one's going to go like this. So I got to figure out where it goes down here, because I'm sure it's going to just not cross. It's going to come. If I plug in negative 4, I have negative 8, negative 9 over negative 4. So I have 9 fourths, which is 2 and a fourth. Okay, so negative 4 and 2 and a fourth. negative 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2 and a 4. Beautiful. And then I'm going to plug in negative 2. So 2, negative 2, negative 1, negative 2. That's negative 5 over negative 2, which gives me negative 2, and my solution point would be 5 divided by 2 is 2.5, right? Yes. So then I go to negative 2, and I go to 2.5. So this one's going to look like this. And I graphed it. And one more. Now on this, what do I have to do before I can graph? What do you have to do on this one before you graph? Simplify the bottom. I have to simplify the bottom. So up top I have an x. On bottom I would have, what does this factor to? Well, multiplies give me negative 2, adds to give me negative 1. Negative 2 and then positive 1. So my x is going to equal 2 or negative 1. So I'm going to go to 2, put an asymptote. I'm going to go to negative 1 and put an asymptote. So when I plug in points, I have to plug points in this middle section, on this outside section, and on this outside section. You have to plug in 3 sets of points in order to solve this. If I plugged in 3 sets of points to solve this, okay, then I'm going to start by plugging in, let's just start with negative 3. If I plug in negative 3, I have negative 3 squared minus negative 3 minus 2. So I get negative 3 over 9 plus 3 minus 2. Negative 3 over 6, 9, over 10, right? So you get negative 0.3. So negative 3, negative 0.3. I'm also going to plug in a negative 2. So I have another 1 in that section. Negative 2 squared minus negative 2 minus 2. Negative 2 squared is 4. And then I have 4. So I get negative 2 over 4, which is negative 1/2. So negative 2, negative 1/2. So my graph is going to look something like this. Okay. From there, I then have to plug numbers in the center. I'm going to start with negative 1/2, 0, and 1. Let's start with 1. 1 squared minus 1 minus 2. So I get negative 3. So I get 1 over negative 2. So 1 negative 1/2 is a solution. I'm going to plug in 0. If you have 0 on the numerator, what do you have? Undefined. Okay. Well, no, not undefined.
That's bottom.
Yeah. If I have 0 up top, I just get
0.
0. So 0, 0 is a point. And then I'm going to have to plug in a 1/2. And if you do a 1/2, you have a 1/2. You have a 1/2 squared, which is 1/4, minus a 1/2 minus 2. So I have 1/2 over 1/4 minus a 1/2, which is negative 1/4. So I get negative 2 1/4. And then I would get that out of there by multiplying by the reciprocal, which is, yes. So flip and multiply 9 over, I would have 9 over 4. Flip and multiply would give me 4 over 9.
No.
So 4 over 18, which reduces down to 2 over 9. 2/9. Oh. So 1/2 and 2/9. 1/2, 2/9. So this one is curving. Okay. Then I need to plug in points out here. I'm going to plug in 3 and 5 probably. So I have 3, over 3 squared minus 3 minus 2. So I have 3 over 9 minus 5, which is 4. So I have 3, and then I have 3/4. So 3 and 3/4, and then I'm going to plug in 5, and I have 5 over 5 squared minus 5 minus 2. So 5 over 25 minus 5, which is 20, minus 2 is 18. So 5/18. So 5, I'm sorry. So it's going to look like this. So on your homework tonight, I need to see you make charts, plug in points, and graph things.
Yes, will do.
I know.
All right, this morning.